Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Please place tray tables and seat backs in their locked and upright positions. This is going to be a wild ride. We're going to go through the drama and the history that is the downfall of FTX. And let me tell you, there's crazy shit from the beginning all the way to the end. If you know about cryptocurrency or you don't, it doesn't really matter, because we're going to walk you through all the shenanigans that was the downfall, the magical, wonderful downfall of FTX and the whole crazy ass fallout that happened afterward. If you don't know about it, let's do some entry basic starting points, okay? FTX was a crypto exchange. You can buy, sell, hold crypto on FTX. It was the fourth largest crypto exchange, worth tens of billions of dollars at its prime, and was very, very well known, largely because their CEO, a young gentleman who I will call SBF because I can never say his name right, SBF was 30 years old and was lauded by the world as being a prodigy. Even some magazines compared him to Warren Buffett. But he was on the cover of Fortune and all these magazines. As a matter of fact, one that came out in September of 2022 talking about him being an amazing investor and a child prodigy. Well, guess what? He was also a criminal, and he was also completely full of shit. So this exchange, FTX, had a sister company called Alameda Research, which was actually started before FTX was, which was a hedge fund utilizing cryptocurrency. And if you put your money into FTX, they had the FTT coin. Don't worry about what all that is. Here's what you need to know. FTX, this crypto exchange, took customer cryptocurrency in and was supposed to hold it for buy, sell, and hold purposes, right? Hence the name buy, sell, hold. You can buy other cryptocurrency, you can send it to somebody else, you can buy things online, you can do all sorts of things with it. But instead of just doing that, they started loaning that money out to Alameda Research. And by loaning out, I mean taking client money, dropping it into their hedge fund, and then saying, you know what, let's just see what happens. But the world didn't know this. They thought, oh my God, you got Tom Brady and all these celebrities backing this project. And even CZ, the CEO of Binance, the #1 cryptocurrency exchange in the world, had a 20% interest in FTX. And even he had a huge stake in this company. And as a matter of fact, the red flags started coming up real quick when you look at it in retrospect. You had Binance's CEO and Binance having 20% ownership. You had Sequoia and all sorts of big hedge funds that had money in FTX, that believed in its future, and they had invested in them. Except not a single one of them required a board seat. And it turns out FTX was ran by 10 kids living in a penthouse in the Bahamas. Now, yeah, they had 300 employees, but the core 10 people were living in the Bahamas. And it turns out they were polyamorous. Everybody was having sex with everybody. And that's going to foreshadow to the end of this video, where that gets to be a little bit more important and relevant. So it turns out that they had some money problems and some concerns, and every time that happened, they offered to just buy the exchange that may have been the money problem. Apparently, exchanges were talking about liquidating their position in FTT, FTX's coin, and instead of just letting them liquidate it and drop down the value of their currency or causing a concern for clients to have a run on money, they decided they would buy the exchange. And then SBF got really, really loose and fast with his money. They sponsored the name rights for the Coliseum or whatever it is in Miami where the Heat played basketball, and they had the whole thing labeled after them. Well, that came down a couple of weeks ago now, because FTX is now in a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And it all stemmed from the fact that SBF was going to Washington and doing all sorts of politicking for cryptocurrency and things like understanding and education, while bad-mouthing CZ, Binance's CEO, who heard about all this and did not like it. So what did he do? He tweeted out that he was going to sell all of his ownership in FTX, causing a run on liquidity. All the customers who had money in this exchange said, I want my money back, give me my money. And FTX didn't have the money. Billions of dollars vanished overnight. And there's a lot of money that went from FTX to Alameda Research. And it turns out, now that the bankruptcy filings are in, some of that money went to go buy some of the employees' homes with customer money. They were buying themselves homes and property. They made loans to one another. And as a matter of fact, Sam, the SBF gentleman, the CEO of FTX, had a backdoor built in the system so that he could move money around without anybody knowing. And the Bahamas, where this company was located, has loose regulations relative to the U.S. There's a lot of things you can do there you can't do in the U.S., like, for example, over-leveraging yourself. In the banking world, you take deposits in and you loan them out. It works very simply, but there are regulations in place to stop banks from over-leveraging themselves more than they pay back. So if a depositor comes in and says, hey, I want $100,000, the banks will have that money to give out. There's a run on liquidity which can happen from time to time in the banking world, which happened during the Great Recession, where people can all go to the bank at the same time and all pull out their money and cause a lot of problems for the banking world. But there's rules and regulations to make that hopefully not ever happen again. And when banks loan out money, they're loaning it out for rates like, let's call it 6 or 7%, and they're giving you a deposit rate of, call it 3 or 4%, and the difference between those two rates is their profit. Well, the problem for FTX was they were taking in all this money, and they were loaning it out on very, very risky investments and paying themselves out. It turns out this seems more like a Ponzi scheme than a bank. So what are all the top officials doing now in the cryptocurrency world? They're calling for the two exact opposite things they were calling for just a couple years ago. They said cryptocurrency was amazing because it was decentralized. Ooh, decentralized, fancy word. And it didn't have any regulations. It was the wild, wild west, but that's okay. It's on the blockchain, a series of computers with general ledgers across the world that all need to balance and make sure that everything's the same. Don't worry about the blockchain. We'll cover that in another episode, but worry about this. Now all those experts, all those proponents of the amazing things that are all cryptocurrency, they're all calling for those two things. We need centralization and regulation in cryptocurrency. Why? Because guess what? When you take all the rules out and there's no centralized way of looking at it, it's all decentralized on the blockchain, criminal shit can happen. And guess what? It did happen. And to make things even worse now, as of the date, the 18th of November that we're recording this, there is a former insider who was an employee that's anonymous at FTX who has said that he has a sex tape of Sam, SBF from FTX, and the CEO of Alameda Research, the 30-year-old girl that he had with 2 years of trading experience run Alameda Research, his hedge fund. And he's threatening to release that sex tape by tomorrow, the 18th, if Sam, SBF, is not held accountable for his wrongs. Now, this is a gentleman who's made a lot of donations to the Democratic Party and some other parties for that matter. And this is a gentleman who has been living in the Bahamas and hiding from most of the world. He seems to be not really remorseful, but he's gone on the record as saying, I f***ed up. But what he hasn't said is, I f***ing robbed people. This was a Ponzi scheme. And the more and more people get into the bankruptcy filings as a newly appointed CEO in the Chapter 11, and the more he's looked at it, this is the same gentleman who unwound the whole Enron debacle. He's saying this is the worst thing he has ever seen. It's only a matter of time before the FBI gets involved and other people get involved, but there are no rules here. What are you going to get him on? How are you going to get him when he has to be extradited from the Bahamas to the United States? I don't know. But what I can tell you is, if that sex tape comes out, you can count me in. That's been this week's lesson for how not to invest in crypto. And I think the crypto market's going to suffer massively because of this. NFT market has pretty much already been wiped out, essentially. And the crypto market is really going to go through what we thought was going to be a winter, but might be a revitalization. Who knew at the end of the day, you didn't have to regulate cryptocurrency. All you had to do was increase interest rates, draw liquidity out of the market, have inflation go up, and then people started pulling their money out of cryptocurrency and started using it for things like real life. Catch you next week.